Hello again, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. We know that we need to leverage more video in our marketing and advertising efforts, but what is the status of TV today? It is still responsible for an enormous amount of our spend. It's changing so quickly, though, with changes in technology, targeting, modeling, and a lot of other improvements. But are you truly taking advantage of this? And are all of the teams, internal and external, working closely together for the benefit of the customer? Michael Beach is the CEO of Cross Screen Media and also the founder and editor of State of the Screens, a weekly newsletter focused on the industry. And he's a subject matter expert on TV and video advertising. And on this episode, we'll discuss the state of the TV industry, the shifts in modeling and targeting, again with those dreaded silos, addressable TV, advanced, local, political, linear, and much, much more. So let's tune in to a video CEO with a TV shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. So please, if you will, tell us a little bit about your background, what's your career to date, and how you got to be CEO of Cross Screen Media.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So prior to founding Cross Screen Media in 2017, I founded a digital ad agency outside of Washington, D.C. called Targeted Victory back in 2009. With one other individual, and we were actually born out of the political space. That's kind of where our DNA came from. I'd worked for almost 10 years in the direct marketing side, so direct mail, telemarketing, kind of all of your field operations, and really kind of where that made the connection was that was at that time your addressable mediums, where we were. We had a 190 million person CRM file essentially of every registered voter in the United States, and we had all these attributes on how often they vote and they vote in primaries, and then we were laying consumer data from companies like Acxiom onto that to even create richer profiles and start to model off of that. And we saw digital as kind of the best of both worlds for that, where we could get that rich media creative, but with the direct response or direct marketing type targeting. So we started Targeted Victory with just two people, and really grew pretty rapidly. I mean, we were by our 6th year about 120 people, which is where we topped out at, and we started to went through one big presidential election in 2012 where we worked on the Romney campaign. And at that point, you were still kind of picking, when you're picking your media mix between television and digital, it was, a lot of times it's an arbitrary rule, and to that campaign's credit, they actually picked, we're going to do, 20% of our spend is going to go in digital marketing, which in 2012 was pretty aggressive. But what we saw the challenges were when conditions changed, that it was really hard to change that. And so, you had audience targeting in one place, age and gender in another, cable and broadcast at the local level weren't even necessarily matched up. And so we decided to go into television buying from a digital agency's perspective of, is there enough data here now with set-top box data and, addressable TV starting to rise up that we can actually put everything into a simple enough currency that it's not accurate to the 10th decimal point, but it would create a market where people would transact off of it, and we would move money around. And so we kind of built in 2014 an advanced TV platform inside of our agency. Had great success with that. We had a lot of other agencies want to start to license our software or use us for just the advanced TV or the digital targeting part, but then we would turn around and compete with them to be agency of record. Obviously, not the most popular thing, and so saw an opportunity that, especially at the local level, that there was an opportunity to take this into the mass market and really offer the same kind of advanced targeting and speed that we had in politics to all types of brands, and that's kind of how Cross Screen Media was born.
One of the things that we see a lot, obviously, are TV ads whenever there is a political campaign. And how do you sort of see that market evolving? Because we're going to, come up in 2020 to see again a ton of advertising end of 2019 and a heavy amount of advertising in 2020. Where do you sort of see the political market evolving and progressing into more than just the old direct response ads?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an underlying, a really big shift happening. And it's been happening in politics for a while, and it's definitely happening now in kind of the general market, where the modeling and the kind of the analytics that have really been so powerful, even back to probably the 2004 presidential election in politics, is now seeped into everything else. Now all the way to television advertising, and your leadership now that's coming up was kind of born into that world. And so that's now becoming a big part of the currency of the modeling has gotten so much more granular that you're really now able to figure out, okay, who is my actual target? Who is persuadable? Okay, these are the people that are likely to vote. But who can I actually move? And when you do that, it's not uncommon for us to get a file that's only 3 to 10% of the 18 plus population in a market. And now you look at it, okay, well, that's completely changes your calculations for who to train your fire on and what's the most effective medium to do that. And it can really change. I mean, 1 minute it could be, heavy with 65 plus because it's, Social Security or, some type of issue like that. It could be, in this past midterm election, 18 to 35-year-old college-educated females in the suburbs. I mean, those are completely different, targets as well. And I think that is that's really starting to change everything in how people allocate resources.
So how do we look at that more on a local level? I know that's something your company's focused on a lot with TV. And to your point, your match rates obviously are going to be even smaller when you've got that smaller footprint for a local type campaign. Even if they're trying to reach a group in Virginia, when you try to do data-driven TV in a populous state, once you boil that down to a much more local level and you're trying to reach them, how do you sort of geofence that and get scale with video and TV advertising?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you're limited in the addressability of what you can do on digital because of your match rates. And so in your media mix, that might be the first thing that you buy, but you can't obviously spend the majority of your budget on that particular thing. And so it's the idea is that you buy the smartest things first based on how your target consumes content. You're probably going to get to, it's not uncommon for us to see broadcast and cable still as the majority of the budget, but that's, from a video perspective, television is still about 85% of the ad impressions that people see. And so it makes sense for that to be the largest piece. It's then you take that same data set when you're buying linear, buy it using advanced TV currency to where you're optimizing against that strategic target and not a broader age and gender demo. And that can have a very big impact on your media plan.
So one of the things that, we talked earlier offline about, though, that is extremely important to both of us. You come from a digital background, you moved into the TV area, but talk a little bit about how you see marketers, especially digital marketers, struggling with understanding TV. How should we do that? How should we look at it? How do you make that easier?
Well, for us, I mean, it's knocking down the silos in the decision making, and the first step is really to have one team, that is essentially cross screen. Exactly. They understand both. Maybe we look at like there's 3 phases of cross screen. The first is that your organization offers both television, all types of video advertising, but they're completely siloed off teams. And the second phase is that you've got one team that can do both, but maybe there's individuals inside of that that are completely specialized. And then your third phase is that the individuals probably still have a specialty from what their background is, but they understand enough about it that they know when it's the other's the better option. Because if not, and if you're a brand and you've got two agencies, it's a zero-sum battle for the
Absolutely.
dollars, and they're never going to argue for the other person, right?
They're not arguing for the customer's benefit, who doesn't care how many screens there are. They're only they only have one point of view with one brand.
Yeah, and we've done work for over 1,000 organizations, and right now the number of times that one media firm has wired money to the other media firm because they thought it was a better option has happened zero times. So, and that's a big thing. But the interesting shift we've seen in the last 2 years is that it's the digital. Even though we were kind of born out of the digital side and saw that the way to be cross-screen was to learn television, there haven't been a lot of digital-first organizations that have done that. You're seeing more of traditional, especially at the local level, that want to either, at a minimum, want to offer connected TV as a part of their offering, but most of them now are trying to want to go into the other things because the brand marketer just wants to sell more products. And if you can put one plan together that says, here's how we're going to do this, if conditions change, we're going to move money around, which is impossible when everything's siloed off from the start, that's a big advantage.
At least what gets you excited about the future of TV and video and what we can do?
I think the application of, first, the big wave of just, it's still a small portion of television is bought, using advanced TV or, a different currency than age and gender. I think that's going to have a big impact as that really hits the majority of that $70 billion pie. The addressability is, the sky's the limit. Because the one thing that I think being very early into, we were very early into addressable digital video where, networks did not want to, they didn't want to integrate with LiveRamp or any onboarder because they looked at addressability and programmatic as the same thing. They thought it was a race to the bottom. Where in fact, we were willing to spend double a CPM if we could buy it addressable, because our target, again, a lot of times was only 10% of the adult population. And so you apply that math to television, and it's a tremendous opportunity, whether it's, the cable companies and these different groups offering addressability that way, whether it's the viewership shifting to streaming. So it's the same content, but it's being delivered, via streaming, which is obviously addressable. Whichever one of those happens first, I think the market could be a lot larger, I think, than people think it is today by just using standard metrics, because it's a win-win for the brand and for the network.
When we look at the future of TV and you talk about I think a lot of people focus on the DirecTV, Comcast, Dish, Altice, all those combined. But really, I think for the marketplace, what a lot of people are thinking about are the Netflix, the Hulus, those in the world. If we sort of focus a little bit more on those providers, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney, where do you sort of see which networks are really going to move forward, and which ones are going to either stagnate or, sort of in your opinion, struggle?
Well, I think they've got a couple big challenges. Everybody is that the audience is shifting around so rapidly that you've got to identify who's your target audience. How do you maintain or grow just the share of viewership? And that's problem one on the content side, because the explosion of choice. You see this slide that FX puts out every year, just original programming, and that's only full length, high production shows. That's not even all the other things that are taking up time. And so, you could be executing right, you could have great content, but it's just the fragmentation of choice is diluting your viewership. The one thing I think that is in their control more is how they monetize the traffic that they have or the viewership that they do have. And again, that's kind of where, our push always for better audience insights and addressability into their inventory. Because the one thing that we've seen in digital is that the number of advertisers is exploding. And just use Facebook. I think they published this number, but if I remember correctly, it was, they had 3 million advertisers in the U.S. in 2016, and last year they topped 7 million.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because they make it, the way that they're able to do targeting, almost any advertiser can justify a media spend on their platform. And I don't think you don't need to see 4 million new advertisers go into television, but with all these direct-to-consumer brands and other groups, the number should be growing,
mm-hmm.
which would help with pricing and everything else. But they've got to kind of make that value proposition more similar to what the digital players, the more digital native players do.
Where do you see TV and video going from an acquisition standpoint for brands? Because so many people still chalk up a lot of TV and video in general just as brand awareness only, but I can tell you from experience, if you know where to look, you can find how it's driven, sales and lead generation efforts.
Yeah, I today with the traditional metrics that people use, whether it's more time-based, spike analysis or other things, TV probably gets undercounted on the impact. Digital is much easier to measure because a lot of times it's there at the last point, the last click. Now I think that's starting to change. There's some really interesting companies out there that are doing more advanced, analysis to figure out what impact television advertising had. Even if it was the first or second thing that the consumer saw. So I think that will provide value in more direct response. On the connected TV side, you're seeing really interesting things where they're weaving in, interactive functionality into the ad unit. I think there's an example recently with Hulu where you could buy movie tickets right in
exactly.
the ad unit. As long as they don't make that disruptive to the consumer, I think that could have a benefit because then you could have that kind of last click advantage that traditional digital marketing has, but in a more kind of television brand type environment. So those two trends, I think, are going to, have a positive impact.
Yeah, last click is a dirty word to me. So if I'm CMO leading a force, I'm trying to make change and take advantage of the agencies and teams and everything I've got in place, which is, probably spaghetti soup. But I want to take advantage of what we're talking about today and start pulling together, more of a data-driven approach to my TV advertising so that I can connect it across all channels. What's your advice, per your point on no agency ever wiring money to another agency? What's your point of view on how they start taking advantage of looking at an option that they obviously need to make, start considering?
If a marketer is going to have multiple agencies, if they're going to go, the specialization route, then they need to take more of a leadership role in deciding what the budget is and the allocation. They can't let probably each group come to them and say, here's how much money we need, because, if it's $1 million buy, then each person is going to ask for $1 million or close to it. So they probably need to take a leadership role. And so we do see, brand marketers that want, that's their next step, is that if they can at least control that process and make an allocation based on what's best for them, then that's a step forward. Secondly, they may, have, they want to hire a video agency and not, and still allocate the dollars the old way, but to one entity, and then that entity move the money around between its organization. Again, hoping that agency is far enough along in those cases being cross-screen processed. And then obviously you see some brands that are in-housing and just kind of bring this entire decision in-house. And the one area on that I see is probably a bigger trend than most is that protecting their customer data is a lot more important, I think, than people realize, and that that may be holding back some of the evolution here of brands not wanting to give their CRM data to to a media agency or somebody. I mean, it's kind of a combination of that data now is so valuable, and the turnover rate on agencies and is so much higher than normal that there's a little bit of risk there.
So what are your thoughts on where the agencies shake out? We had acquisitions obviously a lot over the last few years. I was part of a company that was one of them as well. You had, Merkle gets purchased by Dentsu Aegis, Acxiom gets bought by IPG, LiveRamp gets spun off into its own parent self, and then Acxiom becomes part of the IPG umbrella, and then Epsilon gets bought by Publicis for a really large amount of money. What do you think is going to happen as we sort of continue to evolve with this consolidation and where the marketplace is going for a lot of those bigger agencies that are driving this environment with a lot of the Fortune 2 to 500?
Well, yeah, I think another issue is even the consolidation inside the agencies amongst their various companies. I mean, they've created silos over the years, and so I think they see that the marketer, the brand marketer wants simplicity and wants their life to be made easier, and
it's such a great point.
So I mean they definitely need to get more into the first party data realm, which I think was probably the driver of most of those deals. The question I would ask though is the value the customer owns the first party data, and so
what's the value add that they bring?
Is that actually there's obviously other things beyond the data, but that will be kind of remains to be seen from my perspective.
What are your thoughts on 5G in particular, and where the market will go with 5G? What do you think we'll continue to see with advertising?
I mean, the kind of the biggest thing we've been focused on, especially in the newsletter, is it's kind of like two big trends of the streaming video on demand or the virtual MVPDs. Have the ones that have gone national have essentially gone outside their footprint, and you haven't seen the kind of the traditional cable companies do that yet, but you can see where your video service is no longer limited to your cable footprint. Because YouTube and Hulu aren't limiting themselves to any type of footprint. And so you got that as kind of trend number one. Trend number two is now, what if your broadband access is no longer limited by a physical footprint? And those theoretically become totally dislodged, or they get bundled together, like this Verizon and YouTube TV deal. Yeah, so the choice of the consumer is about to grow rapidly, because they can now, theoretically be able to decouple their broadband service from their video package. And then, right now, the broadband service and the delivery of the pay TV is the relationship for the addressability. And so, are there now two entities? Like, today, I'm a Comcast customer. Comcast is, sitting really pretty with being able to deliver addressable advertising to me because they are my broadband provider and my cable TV provider. Is there, a scenario, a year or two from now where maybe Verizon is your broadband provider over 5G and Comcast is your pay TV provider, and then both of those entities theoretically, it's just I think the number of choices is going to, people are getting overwhelmed by just the number of virtual MVPDs that are popping up. But now if you add that to, you can have 5 or 6 different broadband providers, all doing their own bundles and things. I think that'll be, that'll be very interesting.
It will indeed. So, talk a little bit then about State of the Screens, which is a fantastic newsletter that's got a lot of industry news, a lot of entertainment news. But tell us a little bit about that, and the evolution of that, and how you got started, and how that's helped put the word out for you and your company and your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started State of the Screens almost exactly 2 years ago today. We just put out our 104th weekly edition. It's really focused on, video advertising at the core, but we kind of go beyond that a little bit to talk about, we talk a lot about Netflix, even though there's no advertising, or,
Not yet.
certain entertainment. Yeah, not yet, exactly. Anything that we think is a trend that could impact advertising. For instance, the people driving to ad-free products is taking away, ad inventory. If they leave, traditional TV an hour viewing and move over to ad-free streaming, that's 16 minutes of advertising that's gone. And so that we think that has a big impact on the advertising world. And so that's kind of our focus. Secondarily, audience-based, addressable is obviously our background. And so, that's really our point of view, that we think that this is, right now a win-win for both the consumer and the marketer. It's what steps do we need to take to make this happen?
Michael, you are near the beaches of Washington, D.C. Not a lot of sharks in the water there other than the political ones. Since you're talking to somebody nicknamed Shark on a shark's perspective, I have to ask, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh, man. My wife's a religious watcher of Shark Week. So that's a good question. Well, I don't know the exact name. This massive shark they found.
The Megalodon.
Megalodon. I was very interested. I got down about a 15 or 20-minute internet rabbit hole on that. So I have to say that would be my favorite for the day. I don't think I'm going to see that, but
well, there you go. So, Michael, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. Number 1, Netflix or Amazon?
Netflix a year ago, I would have said Netflix for both original content and for the library. I would say in the last year, I've probably watched more Amazon originals than Netflix originals.
Yeah.
But probably still spend more time in Netflix, but it's much closer than I would have guessed in a year.
Same. Number 2, Comcast or DirecTV, AT&T, AdWorks?
I think they both they're both making similar moves with, NBC Universal and Warner Media, to where, I think I wrote this in the newsletter this past week, where the opportunity is, how can you get that addressability to the entire 16-minute per hour ad pod? And so I think that when you do the math on even moderate success and applying that to the other 14 minutes, beyond the local allocation, I think that they both are positioned well to do that. The next thing is, they both have massive subscriber bases, which can create a coalition of other media companies to increase that number. I think that will be in the short term, probably the biggest impact for either, because that is going to be a limiting factor. Because if you've topped out at 30 million homes, I'd say Comcast, just because I think they're further along in the acquiring and integrating their ad technology. Companies like Freewheel, whereas with AT&T, that's probably a tough thing to get integrated. They're just kind of getting started in this process, but AT&T is not a distant second.
All right, number 3, addressable TV or advanced TV?
Addressable TV is much, much sexier and much, definitely better. But advanced TV will have a bigger impact on brand marketing for the next couple of years. I mean, if you can apply that to the majority of the budget, you can have billions of dollars of impact.
At least advanced TV makes traditional bad buyers better than they were. It's better than the spray and pray.
Exactly.
So, number 4, political advertising or advertiser brand advertising.
Political advertising has, targeting and speed has a clear advantage. I think it's kind of at the bleeding edge. Planning and other things, it's tougher because of the compressed time frames. And so, I think
So
a
true.
brand advertiser could learn a lot. If you could adopt any of the tactics from politics, it would serve
Oh my gosh.
every brand advertiser well.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of political campaigns that I worked on where something happened on a Monday and you'd have to hyperdrive fix it for something to fix that weekend with a new ad campaign.
Absolutely.
Hundreds of times. But if it was a large brand, you'd never pivot or be that nimble. So number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, man, I would say,
That's a transition for you, isn't it?
yeah, I got to go biscuits. The Cracker Barrel, just trying to go through all my
Thank you.
spots. Yeah.
Finally, a man after my own heart.
Yeah.
Where you get both choices. So, Michael, where can people find out more about you, Cross Screen Media, State of the Screens newsletter, and more?
Yes, best place to reach me directly on Twitter at Michael Beach, Cross Screen Media at crossscreen.media, and then State of the Screens. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter at stateofthescreens.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Michael, for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
I appreciate your time.
So there was my conversation with Michael Beach, the CEO of Cross Screen Media, and also the founder and editor of State of the Screens, a weekly newsletter focused on the industry. And he's a subject matter expert on TV and video advertising. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, as he said, there's a really big shift happening that shows how powerful the modeling and targeting is. Leadership now understands this better at many companies, but there's still a lot of work to do. Modeling has gotten so much more granular, and they are starting to see audience files that are much smaller and much more targeted. I did also. I can tell you firsthand the value of targeting your actual audience versus that blind reach. Simply ask yourself, who is my actual target? Know that in TV you can talk to specifically that target, but remember that you have to know your audience. You can't find your target customers if you think your target customer is everybody. Second, if you've listened to this show much, then you know how much I dislike the silos that exist in marketing teams, internally at brands and externally with their agencies. Knock down the silos in the decision making. Yes, a lot of teams are specialized, but as Michael said, the brand marketer wants simplicity. And from me, remember that your customer doesn't care if you have 5 teams, for example, building 5 targeted lists that has some overlap. What they see is mixed messaging, bad timing, and wasted ads. Make your spend work together. If not for the customer, then at least for your own budget. Customers don't live in silos, so don't let your marketing and advertising efforts live there either. Third, addressability is still in the early stages, but the sky is the limit. I can tell you that I was one of the early practitioners in this sport, and the publishers, agencies, and advertisers knew my affinity for addressable targeting. There is still a lot of value in other forms of TV and video advertising, where you still get a bulk of the ad impressions. And yes, your CPM is higher, but at least you know where you're spending your money and who you're targeting. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for letting me spend this time with you. And remember, the next time someone asks you about silos, just say moo. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.